Good King Wenceslas last looked out on the feast of Stephen.
Hello, this is John speaking with his voice. We're all very happy to be able to talk to you like this on this little bit of plastic. This record reaches you at the end of a really gay year for us, and it's all due to you. I'd like to say thank you to all the Beatle people who have written to me during the year. I'd love to reply personally to everyone, but I just haven't enough pens.
This is Paul here. We're all dead pleased by the way you've treated us in 1963, and we try to do everything we can to please you with the type of songs we write and record next year. Well, I'm running over my time, and people are telling me to stop. Ringo, stop
shouting those animals.
I'll finish now with it. Wishing everyone happy Crimble and a Merry New Year.
Yeah, Ringo.
Hello, Ringo here. As you know, I was the last member to join the Beatles. I started to play drums in the group 1962.
Well, good King Wenceslas last looked down on the feast of Stephen.
Hey. Thank you, Ringo. Thank you, Ringo. We'll phone you. Brightly was the shone that night, though the winter cruel, when a pork pie came inside, gathering winter cruel. I'm George Harrison. Nobody else has said anything yet about our secretary, Freda Kelly in Liverpool.
Get out, Freda!
So on behalf of us all, I'd just like to say a great big thank you.
Rudolph the
No reindeer had a very shiny nose.
I was just a secretary then, and funny enough, I'm still a secretary now. And who would want to hear a secretary story?
Millions of girls around the world wanted this dream job. They wanted to be the secretary. She epitomised all their dreams and all their hopes, and all these girls wanted to be Freda Kelly, to be that close to the Beatles.
Oh, I didn't expect to talk, maybe grab one of them, but I wouldn't hurt them. I'd just talk to them maybe. But I wouldn't, grab them like everybody says they're going to cut their hair and everything. We wouldn't do that.
If you look at what is history now, the Beatles were together 10 years. Freda worked for the Beatles for 11. She was there right before they made it and right after they finished. So that says it all, basically.
I want you to know.
Tell me, when you hear a Beatles record, what thoughts run through your mind?
Beauty, sheer beauty. The Beatles bring joy into the world, the happiness. We forget our cares when we hear Beatle records.
Freda was far more than a secretary to the Beatles. She was a family member. She's never had the same recognition that a number of people within the inner circle have had, simply because she never pushed herself, she never wrote a book, she never agreed to do interviews. She's always kept a very, very confidential existence.
We came here at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 to see them, and all they do is push you farther and farther away, and then they don't even let you see them.
A lot of people didn't take these girls seriously, but I did. Because, I was one of them. I was a fan myself. So I knew where they were coming from.
We grew up with them. They started when they were younger and we were younger. And all through these years, we've just developed with them and grown up with them. And they belong to us, But there could never be another Beatles. Never.
She's one of the last survivors of the whole Beatles era. And this story of Freda Kelly's will be surely one of the last true stories of the Beatles that you'll ever really hear.
I've been a secretary for half a century, 50 years, and that's quite frightening. This job is interesting, but it's not as exciting as my last job. I don't get the phone calls that I did in the 60s, like, an invite to a premiere. Roy Orbison's having a party, and we've managed to get a few tickets. Do you want to come to that free? And yeah, OK, I'm on the next train. I left school when I was 16, and my first job was at a firm called Princess. I was in the middle of a typing pool, which is rows of secretaries just typing away. The lads from different levels of floor would come down and give me work to do. Well, most of my day was just spent typing contracts, typing letters. It wasn't the most glamorous of jobs, but I was a working woman now. One day, two guys from upstairs came down and came over to my desk and just said, "Come on, Freda, we're going to take you out for lunch." I didn't know where it was going, and I ended up in the cavern. Now, I'd never been to the cavern before. I didn't even know what I was going into because it was a cellar. It had like a unique smell. There was no ventilation, and sometimes the toilets overflowed, and it was opposite a fruit market. So it was probably a mixture of disinfectant, rotten fruit, and sweat, all rolled into one. There was 3 archways, and in the middle archway was wooden seats, all different types of wooden seats. They weren't all in rows and all the same. There was a little wooden stage at the back, and the Beatles were playing on the stage when I first walked in. And I never experienced anything like that. It was everything about them. It was just the way they dressed with all this leather gear. They were larking about and dancing on stage and mucking about with the audience. And on top of everything else, there was the music. It was just unlike anything I'd ever heard. I was hooked. I just was amazed by everything I saw, and I thought, oh, that's it. I'm going to go tomorrow. Well, I think it's put down that they played something silly like 294 times. Out of that, I would say I probably saw them about 190 times.
1, 2, 3, 4! Well, she was just 17, you know what I mean, and the way she looked.
Freda was definitely a staple of the cavern, yeah. She was always there. And she more or less sat in the same seat.
I used to like the second arch on the left-hand side because it was just dead handy. You could pop in and out the band room all the time. There was about 2 rows in the front. They would leave their rollers in until before the lads would come on stage, and then they'd take their rollers out and doll themselves up and everything.
She wouldn't dance with another.
It was conversation all the time with the audience. If somebody came in and a different hairstyle, they'd pick on them. They'd go, have you been to hairdressers, or who got you up this morning? But you answered them back. They liked the razzmatazz between you and them. People used to write down a number, give it to them and ask them, would they play that number? Now, if you gave it to John, Paul always went over to John and leaned over his shoulder and read the request out. I just thought, well, John Reid, or...
He looked pretty arrogant, to be honest. He'd look at the crowd like that, as if he was going to kill everyone in the crowd.
And then I mentioned it to somebody, and they said, oh, no, John's as blind as a bat. He wears glasses, and he never wears his glasses, so he can't see further than his nose. I liked George singing 3 Cool Cats. I loved that one. Or the Sheik of Araby, because he used to do a little dance, and I liked him doing the little dance. He used to sort of kick his feet along the stage and do that. A few times I rang Paul up because one of my friends fancied him and I wanted him to sing for her. We used to just dial Gast and then the number 6922. Hello, and you go, oh, hi, Paul, it's Freda. It's Linda Shepherd's birthday on such and such a day. Can you play Love of the Loved for her? Yeah, OK. I got to know them personally through just talking to them, going in the band room, because when they came off stage, they used to either sit in the band room talking to different people who ever came in, and then you would just sit by them and you would just ask them where they were playing or how come you weren't here yesterday. But Paul was always nice and always friendly, and, you know, any time you'd ask Paul to sing something, you know, he would do it. John, a man of many moods, depending on what side of the bed he got out in the morning, you know. He could be really grumpy, but he was always himself. He never put an act on. People say George was the quiet Beatle, and I suppose he was in one way, but he was never quiet with me. He was more quietly spoken, I think, than the others. He was very thoughtful. Ringo hadn't joined the group yet. Pete Best was on the drums, but Pete was very shy, but he was also very handsome, so he had a big following round town from the girls. They loved Pete. They all lived my way home on the south side of Liverpool. And Paul and George had cars. And then they'd say, do you want to lift home? My father wasn't keen on them. He saw them. And what he saw, he didn't like. If they had a suit on or somebody had a suit and a collar and tie, and he probably would have approved of them, but he didn't approve of the Beatles.
Love letter straight from your heart.
But I was always laid back from work. I was always like rushing and puffing and panting and sitting down and, you know, starting to type. And, oh. I couldn't say I was somewhere else or I got held up in a restaurant or trying to get some food because I had the cabin smell on me, so they knew exactly where I'd been. The girls in the typing pool had photographs up on the wall of Pat Boone and Elvis and Tommy Steele and Cliff Richards, and I didn't like any of them. So I found a little picture of the Beatles, but it was only dead small, and I remember putting it up on the wall, and the personnel manager copped me when I was putting it up on the wall, Mr. Mould, and he said, "Ooh, what are you doing? Who are they?" And I said, "Oh, they're the Beatles." And he went, "Who's the Beatles?" And I said, "They're a Liverpool group." And he went, "Never heard of them." And I said, "Oh, you will one day."
And I kiss the name that you sign. And darling, then
Bobby Brown was a girl who went to the Cavern and started a fan club for the Beatles. Now, I couldn't understand why the Beatles had a fan club because they were just a local group. But I eventually ended up helping Bobby. And then Bobby got a boyfriend and lost interest in running the Beatles fan club. So I took over from there. I was buying stamps myself in the beginning. And I remember being in the band room one day, lunchtime, and saying to Paul, "Do you owe me 7 and 6 for stamps?" And he went, "I haven't any money." And then Bob Wooler paid them. And I sat in the band room till Bob Wooler paid them. And I said, "You've now got money." So he gave him his due, paid me. I just had this faith, and it wasn't just me. He just knew they were going to be famous one day. But I couldn't visualise the fame that they got. To me, being famous was playing on the Empire, having a record in the charts. Cliff Richards was big in those days, and being as big as Cliff Richards, that was as far as my vision went.
Everything was new. Nobody knew what was going to happen. People who ever say to you, "We knew they were going to be a success," they're lying through their teeth. Nobody knew it was going to be the world phenomenon that it became.
I got to know Brian Epstein through the Beatles. I was going to see the Beatles all the time, and then Brian Epstein started to come to see them, and that's how we became friendly. Everybody in Liverpool knew who he was because he was manager of Nems Limited, the biggest record shop in the north of England. I do remember it was St Barnabas's Hall in Penny Lane. It was a Saturday night. I walked in. I just know Eppie coming up to me. And he then told me that he was signing the Beatles and he was starting his own firm and he needed a secretary. And then he said, "Did I want to come and work for them?" And I said, "Oh, go on then." I just remember saying, "Oh, go on then." And I was so excited because I was starting my dream job, working for the Beatles.
I think what Brian Epstein saw was somebody who was a fan without being an over-the-top fanatic. I would call her more of an admirer. She appreciated the Beatles, and that fitted perfectly. I mean, Freda was there on the scene and ready to take over.
We had a lot of respect for Brian. He was obviously, we thought he was really posh, you know. We were all Liverpool scruffs, really, but Brian was very posh. And for him to choose Freda to be the secretary, we thought, hey, wow, she must have something, you know. He could have picked anybody.
That's when I had to tell home, because I didn't want to tell home, because I knew, I just knew the reaction. My mother died when I was 18 months and she died of cancer. I had a good relationship with my father, but also he was very protective towards me because I was his only child. I was 17, so I managed to pluck up the courage this particular night at tea time, and I just said casually, you know, oh, I'm starting a new job on Monday. And I do remember him saying, has it got anything to do with the Beatles? And I just blanked it. I must have turned my back. I know I didn't lie, but I didn't answer the question. And all I remember was the teapot going down with a big slam. We used to call him Daddy Eppie. He was Brian Epstein's father. And it was his business. We were on the top floor of his shop. The first floor was what we used to call the white goods, was televisions and washing machines and things like that. And then on the second floor, that was Brian Epstein's office. And then there was a storeroom behind his office. So I worked in the storeroom. They changed that into an office for me. In the beginning, the lads were in the office nearly every single day. You know, they just popped in and out. They would sit by my desk for a chat, or while they were waiting to go into Eppie's office. So I got to know them more. I mean, I was 17, so naturally I did have crushes on them. The way I describe it, and this is the truth, I mean, if Paul looked nice or sang a song for me or something, I was in love with Paul that day. I fancied him that day. But then the following day, if Richie asked me how my dogs were, because he knew I had Yorkshire Terriers, he'd say, oh, how are the dogs, you know? And I think, oh, yeah, I fancy Richie. And then I think, if George offered me a lift home from work, well, I'd be in love with George that day. And then think, yeah, I definitely fancy George. But then if John came in and started talking about various things, and I think, no, you know, I like his nose, I like the Roman nose. But it would only be for a day or two.
Did you go out with any of them?
No.
Okay.
Pass.
No stories there?
Oh, there is stories, but I don't want anybody's hair falling out or turning curly. That's personal. It was the end of a working day, and Eppie just came in and said, come on, Freda, put your coat on, I'm going to take you somewhere. I had no idea where. And next minute we were at the Empire. And then next minute we were in a box. I'd never been in a box at the Empire. It was this one on the left. He'd managed to get the Beatles a spot on the Little Richard show. And I think somebody was sick or something, and he'd managed to get them on. And I remember sitting in the box, it was just Eppie and I was to the left, and then I looked down on stage, and the whole theatre and the stage were in darkness, except for this light shining on Paul's face, and him singing A Taste of Honey. I don't cry, but my eyes sort of filled up, and I just couldn't believe that the Beatles were on the Empire, the biggest theatre in Liverpool. And I thought, this is it. They've made it. They're going to be famous one day. Beatles' first hit, as far as I'm concerned, was Love Me Do. I mean, I was one of the ones that bought it, and I didn't have a record player. And there was loads of girls like me who didn't have record players, but we bought it just to boost the sales.
Love me do.
You didn't have pop stations then, but we had one station called Radio Luxembourg, and they used to do the charts. And I remember staying up late, sitting by the radio, holding the knob, trying to keep it on the same wavelength and waiting to hear the Beatles record. And when it got to 17, that was amazing. I know it only stayed a week, I think, but it didn't matter. They were in the charts.
Someone to love, someone like you.
I was working for Brian Epstein, doing a normal day job, but I also had to do the fan club overnight. Silly me, I gave out my home address as the fan club address.
Love me do.
The postman knocked on the door and he said to me, "Who gave this address out? You've got 200 letters here." And I said, "Sorry, won't do it again time." Anyway, little did he know, within the next few months, the Beatles became more famous, and instead of just 200 letters, they were coming in bundles, and those bundles came in sacks. So the van rolled up. Well, my father wasn't keen on the Beatles anyway, and his own personal mail, your telephone bill, your electricity bill, your gas bill, all in the fan mail. So he just looked at me and said, "You've got to put a stop to this. What possessed you to give our home address out?" I didn't think at the time, did I?
My mother has never played the fame game. If she had, things would be completely different now. And she might not be working 6 days a week, 9 till 5 o'clock at night, and very stressed when other people have retired. And she hasn't got that joy.
I think these are all Christmas decorations. Oh, success. Well, I kept a couple of scrapbooks with theatre tickets in and newspaper cuttings in. A few fan club letters. Yeah, they're old. I think it's records and, oh, my scrapbook. Yeah, cuttings book. I mean, I haven't looked at these. I don't know. 40 years since Rachel was born. I could have been a very, very wealthy woman, probably a millionairess, if I'd have kept everything. I had loads of autographs, photographs, all the fan club stuff, Apple stuff, fan club records. But over a period of time, I gave it all away. But I don't regret that, because I know when I gave the majority of the stuff away, I gave it in 1974. And I actually handed the stuff to Beatle fans myself. So I knew the Beatle fans got all the fan club stuff that was left. I've got these 4 boxes anyway. I didn't even think I had 4 boxes. As I'm flicking through, there's so many memories coming back to me. I'll just pick something up and I'll remember that day. Oh, this is George Harrison's real hair.
Well, I'm ready, I'm willing, and I'm able to rock and roll.
A few months after Love Me Do, the lads had their first #1 hit, which was Please Please Me. Well, we were gradually getting letters from 50 a day, 200 a day to my home, and then it worked up to, I'd say, about 800 a day. And then eventually You didn't even count them, you just threw the mail in the corner. I would put loads of photographs in front of them, and they would go into Epi and they would take the photographs in with them, and while they were talking to Epi, they were all signing. But they never complained about signing things, never ever. I think it was because it was early days and they were all excited by it all, so nothing was a problem. Out of all the Beatles, I'd say George was the best one for signing things. He would come in and he'd go, "Do you want me to sign anything?" "Well, what have you got in your cupboard?" The Beatles called him Epi, like we all did. But to his face, he asked us to call him Mr. Bryan in the office. He was the boss, so it was Mr. You know, he had an aura about him. I know he was probably only 27 then, but he was old. 10 years was a big difference in those days. Where I'm 17, he's 27. He came from like a well-off family and he had nice clothes and spoke with a posh accent. So, I mean, you had respect for him. He threw a few tantrums in the office and you just kept out of his way. Oh, well, I did. Probably that's why I lasted 10 years. Some people didn't or retaliated and they were sacked on the spot, you know. He was the boss and he was the boss.
Brian Epstein was notorious for his dreadful tantrums. He would hire and re-fire his top executives, you know, at the drop of a hat. Freda was sort of immune, if you like, to the temper tantrums. She was never hurt by them.
We had a new dictaphone and he gave me this tape to do while he was out. And I'd done about 2 letters and the tape got stuck. So Neil Aspinall came in. I said, "Oh God, you know, I've got this tape and I've got it stuck and there's a load of work on it." We pressed, we'd say, the two things and we erased all the work. He came in the office and I just saw John at the back of him and he went down the coat and he said, "Have you finished the tape?" And I just went, I said, "No, I'm sorry, no, I've wiped it by mistake." He just looked at me and then shouted, "You stupid girl!" And John Lennon saved the day because he was behind me and he must have seen how shaken I was and they'd be like about to erupt. He started laughing and going, "Oh, you know, what have you done, Kelly?" And when a Beatle laughed, Epi laughed. But it wasn't a proper laugh. He wasn't amused at all. And I just remember looking at him and saying, "I'll stay late to do it." And he said, "I know you will, you definitely stay late until all this work is done." I was very naive for my age. I just came into the music business when I was 17. Up until I was 16, I'm camping with the guides and things like that. Once I joined the Beatles organisation, I grew up overnight in more ways than one. And I remember saying to John, "You know what, I don't know what it is about him." I said, "I can't put my finger on it." And I know I was rabbiting on for England and John started laughing. And then he went, "Have you no idea?" And I said, "No idea about what?" He put it to me very innocently. And I always respect him for that. He said, "Well, let's say this free. If you're on a desert island with him, you'd be safe." And the penny dropped. Where nowadays it's legal, and quite rightly so, but in those days they had a lot to put up with. Probably that had a lot to do with his mood swings as well, and trying to keep it from his parents and other people. The music industry was a man's industry in the 60s. In the Beatles circle, there wasn't any high-ranking women. women or girls done the admin side, but the highest you can go in admin is just be secretary to the main guy. I was secretary to Brian Epstein, but there wasn't a hard road to climb. You just had to stay there.
Words of love you whisper soft and true.
I mean, there was a lot to get done, so anybody that came into the office, I would put them to work. I would get them slicing the envelopes, tearing the foreign stamps off, sticking photographs in envelopes, and groups around town, I mean, because they never had any money, musicians around town. So they used to come into my office for a free cup of tea, or if it was raining, or to hear the records. So while they were sitting there, nobody sat there doing nothing. They all used to help out.
I bumped into the lead singer of the Crying Shames, Richie Rutledge, and he had a big post bag on his back, right? I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to the head post office. I said, what for? He said, I've got all the Beatles fan club stuff in the back. Freda told me, not asked me, told me to go and post it. She just had this way about her. A bit like a school teacher, really. You know, you had to do what the school teacher said. And you had to do what Freda said, really. But you didn't have to do it. You wanted to do it for her. Because she could just give you a little smile and you did it.
When Ringo first joined the band, I think he was only in the band about 2 weeks or something, he came into the office. He said, I'm getting letters to my house, and if I bring them in, will you do them? And I went, no, I won't. I said, I've got too much to do. I said, get your mother to do it. You know, all the other parents do. And he went, oh, my mum doesn't know what to do. He put the sad eyes on and just looked, oh, go on, please. You know, I don't get many. To shut him up, I went, oh, go on then, bring them in. He brought about 9 letters in this little poly bag, and he actually put the answers to the questions that they'd asked in the letters on the top of the letter to help me, because he said to me, if you don't know the answers, I've put the answers down for you and everything. He must have thought I was terrible, because I looked at him and I said to him, is this all you get? I couldn't believe. He must have wanted to shoot me, and I went, you've only got 9 letters. He said, will you help me? Will you come and show my mum what to do? I ended up going round, knocking on 10 Admiral Grove, and Elsie opened the door, and I said, I'm Freda from the office. And she went, oh, thank God for that. Come in, love, come in. And I said, well, I've just brought stuff for you to show you what to do. She said, have you had any tea? And I said, no. And she said, would you like egg and chips? And I said, oh, I'd love egg and chips, yeah. And then we started talking, and we got on like a house on fire. Every week, for years, I went to that house.
Will the neighbours not become envious of all the wealth that's been accumulated by the Beatles?
No, not the neighbours around here. They're all very good and all quite proud.
Coming back now, just everything is flashing in my head about just how much joy and happiness and laughter went on in this house. I had a great time here. I loved it. I love coming here every week. It's probably, I haven't been in this house for about 46 years. I spent a lot of my life here. I used to stay till about 1 or 2 in the morning, going through the mail and talking and laughing and things about my life as well and who I was going out with at the time. And it's not one of the Beatles before you start. Also give me advice, motherly advice. She was very jolly, very outgoing, and a real strong laugh. I told her all my secrets when I was a teenager. Maybe she looked on the daughter that she didn't have. Maybe she looked on me as that. She decided I wasn't getting enough money, wages, and she was at a party and Aunt Eppie was there, and then a few drinks down her, and then she started on it and saying, you don't know what you've got there, you know, you've got a good worker there, and she was going on and on. I was going, well, shut up, you know, and she was going, you should pay her some more money, you know, don't pay her enough money, you give her a rise. Anyway, got a rise. 2 weeks later. His words were, we've reviewed your wages, Freda, and we've decided to give you a rise. I thought, good old us. Well, you asked me about a mother figure before. She was the nearest to a mother figure for me. I just adored her.
Once the Beatles were in London and travelling, crisscrossing the globe, Freda became probably the link between the Beatles families in Liverpool and each individual Beatle.
I was surprised when I met her because I thought to have taken on this mammoth, ridiculous job, she must have been some, 50-year-old, settled in her ways, old secretary with bad feet and a large bosom. But she was anything but. She was vivacious and fun and just a snip of a teenager, a little young, thin girl. I suppose you could say that, the Beatles saw her as a sister and the family saw her as a daughter.
NEMS used to close on a Wednesday afternoon. But I never told home that I was off on a Wednesday afternoon. I used to go out with Paul's dad. I used to call him Uncle Jim. We used to go to a place called the Bassnet Bar. He was trying to, we'd say, educate me on liqueurs and cheeses and coffee and things like that. But I would stay there and get sozzled, because I'd be trying all these different things with them. And then they would just put me in a taxi and I'd go home and go straight to bed. Now, John's family, he only had Mimi. Mimi was John's aunt. She took John in when he was about 5, when his parents split up. Mimi didn't let anybody in their house. Very few people got in. You had to go around the back, like the tradesman's entrance. But I actually went up and knocked on the front door, and I got in the front door. It wasn't that you were frightened of Mimi. You just watched your P's and Q's. To me, Mimi was like my father. She was old school. Anytime I saw her with John, which wasn't very often, but she was quite stern, but he did obey her. I think the Harrisons enjoyed the fame more than any of the other parents. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison loved it. They took to it more. She was excellent with the fans. Would let them into her house, would give them a cup of tea. Every day she just sat down and wrote letters to all these kids. But they were very protective of George. Maybe it was because he was the youngest Beatle. Mr. Harrison, Harry Harrison, was always saying to me, you should learn to dance properly. And I said, I don't want to learn ballroom dancing, I don't really like it. And he said, no, I'm going to teach you. He would get me up to dance and show me how to do the quick step and the waltz and everything. Now, he wasn't very tall, Mr. Harrison, so it was like, we were like there, but I was really self-conscious about it. I just did not want to learn to ballroom dance.
All the families and all the boys believed in her. She was good old Freda to them, in other words.
Seeing them on a regular basis coming in and out the office, going to their homes, it didn't hit me how big they were or worshipped they were until the civic reception, which was at the town hall in Liverpool. The only people that were invited really were the Beatles themselves and the Beatles families, and that was it. But Richie's family put me down as one of their family. We were picked up in a car from the council. We must have come in the back way, and the lads are already here, and we had a meal. So we were all relaxed and everything, and the next minute they then had to go out onto the balcony, and just as they opened these doors, the noise hit us with the shouts and the screaming, and I just glanced out of the window, and then I came to behind the door here, and I just couldn't believe Castle Street.
All you have to do is touch my hand to show me you understand. And something happens to me that's some kind of wonderful.
just full of people. As far as the eye could see was people everywhere. I mean, the noise was deafening, there was chaos in the street. Girls were wriggling and pushing to get through the crowd, and they were fainting, and the ambulance men and the police were just passing them over the crowds to get them into the ambulance. It was unbelievable. I think the penny actually dropped with me then, how big they were, because it hadn't really hit home until I saw that amount of people. It was about 200,000 people. I couldn't even visualise 200,000 people until I saw it that day. I think now, and I think, you know, the parents must have been so proud of them. Their sons were out on the balcony and Liverpool was reacting to them. I mean, I'm very proud that I worked for them.
So what was Beatlemania to you at the height of it, when it was its busiest? What, 1964, 65?
No sleep with all the mail.
How many letters a week were you getting, roughly?
Oh, God, thousands. 2,000 to 3,000 a day. Must have sat up till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, just answering. I used to do all what we call detail letters. I used to just bring all them home and then go back to work with my little parcel the next day. I don't know how I lived.
Oh yes, wait a minute, Mr. Postman. Hey, Mr. Postman.
In the wake of the outbreak of Beatlemania, there was a very, very sudden increase in interest amongst fans. People writing in, asking for autographs, asking to join the Beatles fan club, etc.
Brian Epstein decided that we would have a stamp. It looked like a proper signature. And I remember sometimes I would roll it across the autograph book and only half of it would turn out, or it would smudge. I ruined so many kids' autograph books. And of course, I'm a Beatle fan, so I'm thinking the way they're thinking, and I thought, I'd go mad if that was me. I know I was against them, and John Lennon was against them as well. I think he thought because of the falseness, you know. I remember John coming in and I asked him to sign something. And I said, you don't normally sign it that way. And he said, I've decided to sign that way from now on. I said, is that because our stamps look like your other signature? He went, yeah. In the end, I thought, oh, I'm dumping them. I never told Eppie. I just thought, right, I'll just keep all these autograph books and photographs in the cupboard, and when the lads come in, I'll still carry on. I would know when they were staying at home in their own houses. I would know in advance that, oh, George is coming home tonight, so I'll nab him. I'll go from the office straight to Mackett's Lane. So I would go round and get them to sign stuff in their own house. You know, and say, oh, while you're sitting there watching the telly, or, do us a favour, can you just sign that bag full? So some of the fans, especially in the foreign countries, they didn't have the address of the fan club. So they just knew that they lived in England somewhere. So they would just put, you know, to Paul McCartney or to George Harrison, England. But it would come through the system. You know, the post office, give them the due, were very good. They just knew where the fan club existed.
Baby's good to me, you know she's happy as can be, you know she said so. I'm in love with her and I feel fine.
The type of questions kids would ask in the fan club letters was, you know, can I have a piece of Paul's shirt? Or if I send you a map, can you ask Paul to come round at 6 o'clock? Because I'm having a party and I'd like him to come.
I'm so glad that she's my little girl.
But then it got a bit out of hand because then people wanted hair, and it was the same barber that cut their hair. It was always this one guy. I mean, it was their hair. They'd probably do DNA on it now. He would have like a mat down on the floor or something and cut the hair, and then it's... Because he thought I was mental. And he'd just say, there you go, do you want that bit? I go, yeah, thanks. Somebody sent a pillowcase in and said, can you get Richie to sleep on this pillowcase and then send it back to me and get him to sign it. I must have known that he was going to be home for 3 days, so I just threw that in my bag and took it to his house and said, can you sleep on that tonight? And sign it then. And I remember saying to Elsie, that was his mum, can you make sure he sleeps on it? You know? Anyway, he brought it in, just said, yeah. And then we just sent it out together. Whether she believed me or not that he'd slept on it, but he did. He put his head on that pillow.
She's in love with me and I feel fine.
Honestly, if I could do it, I would do it. Because, I was one of them and I was a fan myself. So I knew where they were coming from.
There was one particular fan stowed away on a ship from America to Liverpool docks, finished up on our doorstep. Freda had many episodes like that to deal with, of fans that were just crazy.
They would just open the mail and flick through the mail and go, oh, this kid wants such and such, or this girl wants a piece of my shirt. They'd just laugh. And I said, oh, well, just leave it there, because I've got a bit of your shirt in the cupboard. When I typed the wages, the balance went in the bank for them, and they all got £50 in an envelope, cash, for them to play around with whatever way they wanted. Now, I used to take that money sometimes. If they didn't come in that week, Eppie'd just say to me, are you going to one of the bookings? I know they were playing at the Empire, and I was trying to get through the crowd. And in those days, policemen were always big. And this guy was a big guy, and he was on a horse, and I was trying to wriggle through the crowd. And I just said to him, I need to get into the Empire. Just blanked me. And I said, no, I work for them. Honestly, I've got their wages. I need to get into the Empire. And you and thousands of others, hop it.
My mum is the most private person I've ever met in my life. She would never sit down and put dinner on the table and discuss just idle chitter-chatter about what's gone on with the Beatles in the past or anything like that. That's just not her nature.
Freda, unless you knew her, you would never know what she's done, because she never tells anybody at all. We did a gig the other month in New Brighton, and Freda was in the audience. I saw her come in, and I was on the microphone. I said, I'd like to welcome Freda Kelly, the Beatles secretary, and she just turned around and walked straight out. So nobody knew who she was. They're all looking round, but she wasn't there. She'd walked out.
A lot of people in my mother's life don't even know her previous life, so to speak, i.e. her job. And she's always kept it like that. It was a time of her life, and things had changed, and then she became a mother, so things moved on. So if they do happen to find out, they are rather surprised, to say the least.
Some things are very personal, and I do respect the word privacy. I like my own privacy. And I think even the Beatles, they're entitled to parts of their lives that really people shouldn't invade.
It's a beautiful day.
Richie started going out with a girl called Mo Cox, who was from Liverpool. She was a hairdresser. And we just got on very well together, Mo and I. I think it was because she was just an ordinary girl from Liverpool. Mo and Richie got married in '65, and then she had Sack in the September, I think. But I happened to be in London the day he was born, And I was in the office, and Richie called into the office. And he said, well, I'm going to see Mo now and Zach. Do you want to come with me? And I went, oh, yeah. So I think I was the second person to see Zach soon after he was born.
Days like a holiday we used to have from school. Running to a beach to
John's girlfriend, well, I mean, she was his wife when I got to know Cynthia. She was out of the picture. She was very low-key. We were told that we weren't to say anything, that John was married. Brian Epstein was sitting on it for as long as he could. I even had a friend that was going out with John, and she would go to bookings and he would take her home. But I couldn't tell her that, oh, please, you know, end this now. It's not going to go anywhere. You really want to say something. You're dying to say something because it is your friend. But you work for a company that have asked you not to say things. So you have given your word.
Freda had this Liverpool trait of loyalty in her love life and other people's love lives. Relationships were amongst the top priorities of being personal things that you did not publicise. You certainly did not kiss and tell.
I was out with Paul, you know, walking somewhere. Maybe, you know, he gave me a lift home, or you know, he walked me to the bus stop. Somebody saw us, and then it was, you know, I was marrying Paul. And then, you know, they got a quote, well, Paul McCartney is not marrying Freda Kelly. When it was released that Paul had got married, because people didn't know that he was getting married, phone call after phone call was all Paul fans crying down the phone, oh, why didn't you tell us he was getting married? We didn't know he was getting married. And some of them wanted to kill themselves, and oh, I'll never be a Paul McCartney fan again. He's gone and married somebody else. So you just had to calm them down and say, you know, well, he's still Paul McCartney. You know, he'd still be making his records and everything. No, but he's got married now, and it's not the same. Do you remember a guy from one of the papers? He lived near me. You know, he knew what my job was, that I was working for the Beatles. And I remember him saying to me, could I tell him anything? Freda, you just have to put an envelope through my door with things written on it, and then there will be an envelope through your door. This was just before George got married. Because I thought, well, I can tell you that George is going to get married, you know. But I just looked at him, and then I just said, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. Everybody needs money, and we all like money. Or we'd like to have more money than we have, but not to that extent. I'm not prepared to sell my soul to the devil for a few pounds. It's just me, though, isn't it? You know, everybody doesn't think like me. Maybe some people think I'm silly or stupid, but...
She was a girl and then a woman with absolute integrity and faithfulness. So many other people have, over the years, told, I would say, dirt-digging type stories. Freda never did do that, and never would.
In the beginning, you know, I was just a fan and everything like that. But once I started working for them, the loyalty set in. It wasn't there from day one, you know, because I'm just a 17-year-old. But then as I'm maturing with them, the loyalty is setting in, and you don't break loyalty. I think if you're loyal to something, you should stay loyal.
If she had to be tough, she would certainly be tough. If she had to be sweet, she was sweet anyway. And she was intent on getting the facts right all the time, you know, and lo and behold, if you didn't get the facts right, you know, you were in bad books. And I would like to be in Freda's bad books.
I think that, yeah, Freda's motto in life was, I'll be nice to you, but don't cross me. I'll not deal with you, in fact, if you're trying to tell lies about my boys.
I was quite nervous around Freda, because to me she was like an idol. I was about 14. There was 3 of us worked together. Oh, it was just absolutely amazing thing to do. But, you know, to think that one of the Beatles could possibly walk in, it was just, I just can't explain it now. It was amazing at the time.
They would put photographs in envelopes and they would open certain letters, you know, and then bring the letters in for me to answer, and I would be franking the mail. And this particular day, one of the envelopes that I put through the franking machine was a bit bulky. So I opened it, and when I opened it, there was hair fell out. And the girls were still in the office. And I just said, you know, what's going on here?
She was absolutely livid. I mean, being the innocent party, I didn't know nothing about it. And then my friend Lorraine, she owned up and said it was her.
It materialised that she'd cut her sister's hair and put her sister's hair in the envelope and pretending it was going to be Paul's. And I just said, well, I just can't trust you after this.
I still remember thinking I'd done nothing wrong. You know why? Well, it wasn't my fault.
I'd just done a clean sweep. Didn't just sack the girl that done it. I said, that's it. Sorry, can't trust you anymore.
That was the only time I've been sacked. I didn't want to live that day again, that's for sure. You know, it was horrible. Awful day.
The thing about Freda is that if she found out that somebody was telling lies about somebody, it'd just be, come here you, in front of everybody, and she would castigate them right down the banks. And so she was a bit judgmental, if you like, but so that's Freda.
The bottom line was I had to run a tight ship. I had to answer to Apple and to the Beatles. And if anything went wrong, it was my head that went on the chopping block, nobody else's.
You say you will when you won't. You tell me you do, baby, when you don't.
It was August 1965 and the Beatles were playing on the Empire and the Moody Blues were also on the bill with them. I had popped in to see the lads. I just opened the door slightly and their band room was just full of relations. So I thought, oh, I'm never going to get in here. So I was involved with one of the Moody's at the time, so I went into their dressing room, which was next door. It was just them, and they had alcohol and drinks, so I decided to stay there for a drink, but probably I stayed a bit longer than I should have done. And then I realised that I had to get autographs signed and photographs signed. So anyway, I came back, knocked on the door, and I just walked in. And as I walked in, John said to me, "Where have you been?" And I said, "Oh, I've been next door, I've been in the Moody's dressing room." And he went, "Who's fan club secretary, are you?" And I went, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'm your fan club secretary." And he went, "Not anymore." He said, "You might as well go back to the Moody's and be their fan club secretary." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he went, "You're sacked." And then I looked at the other three. So I said, "Are you sacking me as well?" And they went, "No, we're not sacking you." So I got on my high horse then, probably because of the drink. And I looked at him and I said, "Well, I'll just work for the other three. I won't do your mail anymore." He said, "Oh, I was only joking." I went, "No, you weren't." He went, "Oh, I'm begging you, come back." And I said, "Well, I tell you what, get down on your two knees and beg me to come back." And he looked at me. He said, "If I get down on one knee." And I said, "Go on then, get down on one knee." And he did. And then I said, "Oh, all right, I'll come back to you."
Say you will when you won't, honey, don't.
There has been quite a degree of loss in her lifetime, which not many people have gone through. So obviously her mother dying when she was very young, my brother dying, then my mum and dad getting divorced. A lot of people have gone under for less, and she hasn't. She's strong character, and she's come out fighting every time.
Over a period of time, you know, people have said, "Oh, why don't you do a book?" Or, you know, "You should do a book." And my son did ask me, Timothy did ask me to do a few things, and I just... It was because I never talked about the Beatles or my past, and then something would come on the television and it would jog my memory, and I would say, oh, I went to that, or oh, I remember the civic reception, or I remember this. And Timothy used to say, but Mum, you never talk about it. And I said, Timothy, I haven't got time to talk about it. I'm more interested in going to shops and thinking what to put up on the table tonight for dinner, not to sit down and talk to you about the Beatles. And he just shook it off, you know. And then when my grandson came along, and I thought, well, I didn't do it for Timothy, and then Timothy passed away a few years ago, and then when Niall came along, I thought, well, I'm definitely going to do it now. Shh, I can hear the birdies singing. Yeah, can you hear him singing? You know, because one of these days he might just look at me in the corner with the shawl and the grey hair and a cat sitting on my knee, and I'll probably think, oh, you know, she's never done anything, or... I would like him to be proud of me and see how exciting my life was in the 60s and the fun I had. If I hadn't have done it now, and this is the truth, if I hadn't have done it now, I know I would never have done it.
Hey, Sue. She could always say tomorrow, and she'll never sit down and sort it out. When I was born, things definitely changed. And I think that when anybody has a child in that respect, it does open a lot of doors for people and changes their position in life in general, and you can suddenly reinvent yourself to a degree because Timothy isn't around now, and you don't know what tomorrow brings.
When they came back from America, Brian Epstein decided then that, you know, we had to move to London. And he did, because in those days everything happened in London. It wasn't happening up north. We were planning on where we were going to live and what we were going to do and what clubs we would visit. And we were just, all the excitement and the adrenaline was, oh, we're going to the big city, the capital city. So I went home and said, oh, you know, I'm going to London. The firm's going to London, and I'm going to London with the firm and everything, and I'm all bubbly. And my father, he's just sat in the chair and he's just listening, you know, and he said, London is a city of vice. You're not going. I knew I could go. You know, he couldn't stop me going. But when I started looking in my own mind, he wasn't very well at the time, so that's when I thought, no, I can't do this to my father. Job's a job, even if it is the Beatles, a job's a job. And that's why I handed in my notice. He had a beautiful desk in Morpheus, a really big desk. He didn't even look up when I walked in, you know. I just stood in front of him, and I said, very quietly, I want to hand in my notice, please. He'd never heard that before, and he went, don't you want to come to London? I said, oh, I desperately want to come to London. I'd love to come to London. And I said, but I can't come to London because my father won't allow me.
I know for a fact that Brian Epstein was seriously concerned, and I also know that the individual Beatles were most upset that she wasn't coming to London.
And then Eppie sent for me. He said, I've had a talk with the lads, and we don't want you to leave. And I was just stunned. And he said, I've had a word with your father, and you can come to London on a regular basis. You stay up here. And he said, you can go back to NEMS Limited, and you can have my old offices in Whitechapel. And that was how I didn't leave. Before they moved to London, I wanted to get their autographs. So George was in this day, and I had autograph book upon autograph book for him to sign. And mine, I slipped mine in the middle. So he's signing them, and I'm saying, you know, that's to Rita, that's to Barbara, that's to Steve. Anyway, he gets to mine, and he said, who's this to? And I said, well, just sign that, because I just wanted it out of the way. And he went, what? Well, no, who's it to? And I think it was because I was going, oh, it doesn't matter, just sign it. And I remember saying to him, oh, just sign the book, just sign the book. And he flicked it to the front. And he went, is this yours? And I went, yeah, I haven't got your autograph. I just want your autograph before you go to London. So he signed it. And he pocketed it. He took it. And I went, what are you doing with my book? And he went, I'll get the others for you. And then next time he came in, he just threw it on the table. He went, there you go. And they'd all put little comments in it. Oh, Beatle Monthlies. Before the days of the internet and Twitter and Facebook and everything, the way we got news to the fans was through the Beatles Monthlies. I would get information from their parents, little gossipy snippets. I would also ask them what was going on and little bits of juicy information from them. And I would put it in my newsletter that was in the Beatles Monthly.
Gonna tell Aunt Mary we found Uncle John. He claimed he has a misery, but he having a lot of fun.
Dear Beatle people, I really like to thank each and every one of you who have sent presents for John's birthday. John was really pleased that so many of you remembered him. During his 10-day trip to America with Mal, Paul looked in on a Beach Boys recording session. Ta-ra for now, Freda Kelly. Dear Beatle people, July 1964 will go down in Beatle history as a hard day's month. At last, the first feature film starring our fabulous foursome is ready for showing, and it will be coming to your local cinema quite soon. At the beginning of March, you will see Beatles at Shea Stadium show filmed in New York last August, when the boys starred in the largest ever concert of their career, before 57,000 fans. Thank goodness the rumours about Paul are over. Paul is still with us and is likely to be with us for a long time. Congratulations to Ringo and Maureen, who are expecting their second baby shortly after Maureen's next birthday. George has been to the dentist again. Dear Beatle people, after nearly 4 months of solid session work, the new LP called Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is ready. Beatles are hoping to acquire their own private recording studios at a secret location in central London. New Beatles recording every week. In one short period of just over 4 months, the Beatles have released no less than 16 new recordings. John hated his passport photograph so much that he tore it up and had a new picture taken. Dear Beatle people, quite a lot of letters sent in discussed John, Cynthia and Yoko Ono. At least as many members have written about Paul and Jane. Everyone has dozens of questions to ask, and many of you have only been too ready to put forward your opinions. Here at the fan club, we believe that the Beatles deserve their separate and individual private lives, which should remain their business and no other people's. I'm sure both John and Paul will work out their problems in their own ways, and I think they should be allowed to do so without the help or hindrance from millions of Beatle people. Ta-ra for now, Freda Kelly. Over the years, we could see the effect that his job was having on Eppie. It was taking its toll. You know, the odd time that I went to London and saw him, he was just changing. You know, you could just see things weren't right.
He became obsessed with trying out initially, experimenting with drugs, and then becoming sort of fairly reliant upon them, becoming more and more of a mess.
The 27th of August 1967, I was at home. There was something up with our phone, and I know I had to use a neighbour's phone. And the neighbour came over to me and said, there's a call for you. There's a girl, Pat, wants to talk to you. And Pat said, oh, have you heard about Brian? Have you heard about Brian? He's just been found dead. Well, the media were on this one, that he'd committed suicide. And I just didn't believe that he committed suicide. Somebody said that, that he choked on his vomit. And I tend to believe that tale. The Beatles were actually in Wales. They'd gone there to see the Maharishi, and they were informed there. And I just remember John, out of all of them, he was the one that was sort of stunned. Although I was still young myself, I could still visualise the devastation that it was going to cause. He was the anchor for everything, and it was just, where do we all go from here? What happens now?
So Paul had this meeting set for September the 1st within a couple of days of Brian Epstein's very tragic premature death. And when I got there, nobody else had arrived yet. And he said, before the others get here, I just want to tell you, I think that if the Beatles do not get together and work together very, very quickly now, the group is going to disintegrate.
Magical Mystery Tour, it wasn't the best organised thing. Well, it wasn't organised because Paul had a rough idea, but just a very rough idea. This coach rolled up, and there was all different types of people milling around, and like a guy dressed up as a bit of a clown, and he had like his spotty, funny type suit, and I thought, what's going on? And then this man, I mean, I didn't know him. I found out his name then. It was called Ivor Cutler. And he came over to me and he just said to me, you've got a nice shaped head. We all eventually got on the bus, and I dived for the back. I thought, well, I'll go on the back seat, and you're not really seen on the back seat. And then Paul eventually got on the bus, and he sat by the driver. And then he called my name and he went, Freda, where are you? And I went, I'm here, man, I'm on the back. And he went, can you come up the front? And I went, do I have to? And he went, come up the front. I thought, he's getting severe here now, do as you're told. You couldn't book the hotels in the Beatles' names because they wouldn't have you. So you always had to book them under false names. And Neil was doing some of the hotels, and I said to him, why don't you book it in the Women's Institute or the Catholic Women's League or something like that? And he went, oh, that's a good idea. So I had to go up to the counter in the hotel and say, hello, you've got a reservation in the name of the Women's Institute. And then they went, oh, fine. I said, well, we'll just come in now. The shock on people's faces when we all trooped in, because it was the Beatles, it was people dressed weird. It was a very mixed bunch, very odd bunch, and I was one of them. But where I think Paul decided to do it there and then was because it was so quickly after Brian Epstein's death. He thought it might hold us all together or hold them all together, but I don't think it worked, and that's just my opinion.
But you don't want to think about that. You can be big-headed and say, yeah, we're going to last 10 years. But as soon as you've said that, you think, we're lucky if we last 3 months,
Well, obviously we can't keep playing the same sort of music until we're about 40. Who knows, at 40 we may not know how to write songs anymore.
I hope to have enough money to go into a business of my own by the time we do flop.
I've always fancied having a ladies' hairdresser. Selling, a string of them, in fact, and trot round in my stripes and my tails, Like a cup of tea, madam?
The Beatles stopped touring in roughly 1966, I think. Then Brian Epstein died in 67, and Magical Mystery Tour was in 67, and Apple had started by then. In the beginning, You know, when Apple first opened, it was great, you know, the fun and the madness and all different nationalities in the press office. People didn't act as if they were working in an office or a business. And then it became more settled down, more normal, and there wasn't as much fun. I loved the beginning part of it because it was fun in the beginning and it was fun for them. They enjoyed it so much. Every group wants to be in the charts or wants a hit record, or everything was exciting in the beginning. You know, they got a #1 and then they were asked to appear on the Royal Command performance, and you know, they saw the Queen and they were a hit in America and the civic reception, and it was all these landmarks. And where does it stop? You can't keep carrying on like that, can you? Towards the end of the 60s, it wasn't what the Beatles were doing as a group anymore, it was what they were doing individually. I know Paul's was bringing out, you know, his own LP. John and Yoko were doing the peace movement, and George was doing things, I think, with Clapton, I can't remember. Richie had 2 sons by then, and he was more interested in sort of family life. And then the penny was dropping with me that we haven't got any Beatles as a group anymore.
Well, are you still the Beatles fan club secretary? How's business?
Fine, except for the post strike.
You don't have a group anymore.
Well, we've still got full members, haven't we?
I don't like to lie, but it was trying to bend the truth. When people were asking you questions about what was going on, you had to more or less say, well, yes, like, you know, the Beatles are still together and everything's great, but it wasn't great.
And now, what's the arrangement today?
Well, last August, Paul rang me up and said he didn't want people to be writing about him as a Beatle, which I was doing, and he wanted to split this word Beatles up. There are 4 individual people now recording and everything, and we'll write all about Apple artists. So we're still writing about the 4 Beatles because Paul is still an Apple artist.
Is the atmosphere today anything like it was 10 years ago?
No.
What's missing?
The closeness. It was all fun when we were teenagers, but your life changes, and my life had changed. So I was then 27. I mean, I was married, I had a baby son, and I wanted more children, and I was, we'll say, concentrating on that. I then found out I was pregnant. I'd been trying to get pregnant for a while, and I desperately wanted this baby. And I just wanted to make sure that everything was going to be all right. So that was more important to me than my job, was my married life, my son, and the baby on the way. And then that's when I thought, well, I'm out here. I went to London and had a discussion with Neil Aspinall, the head of Apple, who was their road manager in the beginning, and George and Richie were there. It was just, that was all. I remember we were around a table. I told them that I was pregnant, and they said, well, do you think you would be going back to work? And I said, I won't be going back to work. You know, I'll have 2 children then. And then George finally spoke up and said, Freda, you were there in the beginning, you're there at the end. Let's call it a day. You know, let's end the fan club.
You're still involved in the fan club?
Well, I'm sort of trying to wind it up.
This is what I wrote. Yeah. It says, well, this is it. John, Paul, George and Ringo have each gone their separate ways, and they are no longer collectively an item. There it is, 11 years. 11 years in which we have become a very strong, happy and close circle of friends. There will not be another official fan club for the Beatles as individual artists. Please do not write again. Yours faithfully, Freda Kelly. I haven't read that since it went out. I actually felt quite sad reading it. With me being a Beatle fan myself, I just knew that this is going to break a lot of girls' hearts. So it must have put a lot of lights out for people. Well, the lights went out, didn't they? At the back of all this, I am still, or was, and still, a Beatle fan. So I do think the way they think. We were still getting a lot of letters every day. Well, I took them all home with me because I couldn't leave them in the office. And although I said I wouldn't write again and I wouldn't answer any letters, between running my home and doing the normal things Mother does, I did answer the letters slowly. You know, I may do 3 one night, I might do none the next night, I might do 5 on a Saturday. But it took me, on average, about 3 years to answer all those letters. Once I entered the fan club, that was it. I was then not Freda Kelly anymore. And I just lived, a normal life like everybody else. Nothing to do with the Beatles anymore. When I look back, it is shocking how many people that have gone that I knew from those days. Well, we lost Eppie, first of all. I mean, you've got the main 2. You've got John and George. You've got 2 wives, Mo Cox, Linda McCartney. You've got all the parents. You've got Neil Aspinall, Derek Taylor, my friend Laurie McCaffrey. It brings it home to me. I think fame and money doesn't mean anything. All the wealth, doesn't cure cancer, does it? I've worked with a lot of good people. I did, I loved them.
Who knows how long I've loved you? You know I love you still.
Given a job like that to what became the biggest band in the world, to a girl of 17, that was an unbelievable thing to do. And she never let him down.
Or if I ever saw you, I didn't catch your name.
The tide washes the sea, and every day, Freda was the tide. You saw the effects of the tide, like you see the effects of Freda, but you never actually see a tide as such. It just happened to be there, and Freda was. So tell the story.
Love you with all my heart. Love you whenever we're...
I don't know why Eppie picked me. Maybe it was just fate. And I was taken along for this 10-year exciting ride and then dropped off on the corner where I started it. I'm not famous, I'm not wealthy. I'm still working for a living. I'm still a Beatle fan. So although there's a 50-year gap since I started it, I still like to think that I'm back where I was in the beginning.
I will.
I don't ever have to tell this tale again. It's down now on record. This is it. End of.
Peace and love. My name is Ringo, and this is a message to all of Freda Kelly's grandchildren. Freda was a great friend to the Beatles. She was the fan club leader, and we've known her for a long time. Anyway, we all love Freda. She was great. And Freda was like part of the family, and she knew all our families. She was She was just one of the best. Peace and love, peace and love.
I'm not alone in the night.
It's said that 1 in 4 UK women have problems reaching orgasm, so a group of women are doing something about it. If you'd like to know exactly what, be here Monday at 10. Coming up in a moment, sometimes when you want something that badly, you just have to grab it. Big Fat Gypsy Weddings, next.
Every line. And I kiss the name that you sign. And darling, then I read again right from the start. Love letter straight from your heart. I memorize every line. And I kiss the name that you sign. And darling, then I read again right from the start. Love letter straight from your